I could taste the bitterness in the air before I even stepped into the dining room that evening. It was the kind of tension that clung to your skin, made your chest tight, reminded you that you were never quite welcome in your own home. The table was set with Patricia's finest china, the kind she only brought out when she wanted to remind everyone of her supposed sophistication. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, casting fractured rainbows across the white tablecloth. Everything looked perfect. Everything always looked perfect on the surface. I had spent the last 2 hours preparing the special soup Patricia had requested, a French onion recipe she claimed her mother used to make. My hands still smelled of caramelized onions and beef broth. I carried the tureen carefully, my fingers aching from the heat seeping through the handles. I was so focused on not spilling a single drop that I didn't hear Scarlett's footsteps behind me. She crashed into me with the force of someone who had done it deliberately. The tureen lurched in my hands, hot liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. My heart hammered as I steadied it, my arms burning from the effort. The smell of marijuana clung to her designer jacket, mixing with her expensive perfume in a way that made my stomach turn. "Oops, sorry, Cinderella," Scarlett drawled, not even looking up from her phone. Her thumbs continued their dance across the screen, liking photos, typing comments, living her curated life. "Guess your eyes were stuck in some telescope again, huh? Maybe you should watch where you're going." I bit down on my tongue hard enough to taste copper. I had learned long ago that responding only made things worse. I set the tureen down on the serving cart with shaking hands and turned to go back to the kitchen. "Ella, what are you doing?" Patricia's voice cut through the room like a blade. I turned to see her looking at me with those cold blue eyes, the ones that used to look at me with something resembling affection before my father left. Now they held nothing but contempt. "Be more careful. You almost ruined Scarlett's dress. That's a Versace, you know, worth more than anything you'll ever own." The words weren't new. I had heard variations of them for years, ever since Patricia married my father and brought Scarlett into our lives. Ever since the divorce, when my father had been painted as the villain and I, by extension, became the daily reminder of Patricia's failed first marriage. The fact that I looked like him only made it worse. I swallowed the anger rising in my throat and ladled the soup into bowls. My hands were steady now, years of practice making the motion automatic. I could do this in my sleep. I had done this in my sleep, in nightmares where I served endless meals to people who never saw me. As I placed Patricia's bowl in front of her, I took a breath and said what I had been rehearsing all day. "I need to tell you both something. I got a job offer. In Denver. It's a project management position in tech, and the starting salary is significant. I'll be moving there next month." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Scarlett looked up from her phone, her perfectly shaped eyebrows arching in surprise. Then she started laughing, a harsh sound that grated against my ears. "Denver?" she said between giggles. "What, driving for Uber? Or maybe you're going to be an assistant at some nursing home, wiping drool off old men's chins. Is that the big career move?" "It's a real position," I said, keeping my voice level even as fury built behind my ribs. "Project management in technology solutions, 6 figures, benefits, and I won't have to depend on anyone anymore." That's when Patricia's face changed. The mask of indifference cracked, revealing something ugly underneath. Her knuckles went white around her wine glass. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you even think about abandoning me? Abandoning your sister? After everything I've done for you, keeping a roof over your head, feeding you, clothing you. You're just like your father, selfish, ungrateful, always thinking about yourself." "Patricia, I started, but I never got to finish." Scarlett was out of her chair so fast it toppled backward with a crash. Her face was flushed red, not from embarrassment but from rage. I had seen that look before, usually right before she said something cruel, but this time was different. This time her hands were clenched into fists. "You worthless little bitch," she snarled, and then she was on me. The first shove sent me stumbling backward into the serving cart. Dishes rattled and crashed to the floor, porcelain shattering into 100 pieces. I tried to catch myself, tried to put my hands up to protect my face, but Scarlett was faster. Her fingers tangled in my hair, yanking my head back so hard I saw stars. The slap came next, her palm connecting with my cheek with a crack that echoed through the room. "Stop," I gasped, but she wasn't listening. She had never listened. Her foot came up and caught me square in the arm as I tried to shield myself. The pain was immediate and blinding, radiating from my forearm up to my shoulder. I heard the crack before I felt it, a sound like a branch snapping, and then everything was white-hot agony. I screamed, the sound torn from my throat as I collapsed to the floor, cradling my arm against my chest. "You're nothing," Scarlett spat, standing over me like a victor surveying the conquered. "You've never been anything but a parasite. Get out of our lives and disappear. That's all you're good for." Through the haze of pain, I looked up at Patricia, waiting for her to intervene, to tell Scarlett to stop, to show even a shred of maternal concern. Instead, she walked calmly over to Scarlett and placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Calm down, sweetheart," Patricia said softly, stroking Scarlett's hair. You know Ella has always known how to push your buttons. She brought this on herself. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My arm was broken. I could feel the bone grinding against itself, could see it already starting to swell. The pain made me nauseous, made the room spin. Mom, I managed to choke out, my voice breaking. I think my arm is broken. I need to go to the hospital. Please. Patricia turned to me with those ice blue eyes, and I saw nothing there. No compassion, no concern, not even basic human decency, just cold calculation. Don't be so dramatic, she said. Take care of it yourself. Put some ice on it. And most importantly, Ella, you listen to me very carefully. You will not call the police. You will not make a scene. Scarlett has a bright future ahead of her, and I will not let you destroy it with your victim act. Do you understand me? The threat in her voice was unmistakable. I looked down at my arm, at the unnatural angle it bent, at the way my fingers were already starting to tingle and go numb. I looked at Scarlett, who was watching me with a triumphant smirk on her face. And I looked at Patricia, the woman who was supposed to be my mother, the woman who had just watched her daughter break my arm and decided her only concern was protecting the attacker. Something in me broke then, something more fundamental than bone. It was the last thread of hope I had been clinging to, the desperate belief that somewhere underneath all the cruelty, Patricia still cared about me even a little bit. That thread snapped, and I felt myself go cold inside. Patricia reached for the wine bottle and poured 2 generous glasses of the expensive red she had been saving. She handed one to Scarlett and raised her own. To teaching important lessons, Patricia said, clinking her glass against Scarlett's. Cheers, darling. You did well tonight. I watched them drink, watched them celebrate my pain, and something hardened inside my chest. I was still sitting on the floor among the broken dishes, cradling my arm, tears streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of rage. That night, after they had gone to their rooms, I managed to wrap my arm in a makeshift splint using magazines and duct tape. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through me, but I gritted my teeth and did it anyway. I had learned to be self-sufficient out of necessity. When you can't rely on anyone, you learn to rely on yourself. I waited until the house was silent, until I was sure both Patricia and Scarlett were asleep, and then I carefully made my way to the computer in the den. With my good hand, I started searching. I searched for free clinics in the area. I searched for information about my father, Robert, the man Patricia had spent years telling me had abandoned us, who never cared, who was better off forgotten. I searched for legal information about assault and domestic violence, and I made a plan. The next morning, I told Patricia I was going to the library. She barely looked at me, just waved her hand dismissively and returned to her breakfast. Scarlett was still asleep, probably sleeping off whatever she had been smoking the night before. I walked 6 blocks to the free clinic I had found online, my arm throbbing with each step. The nurse who saw me, a kind-faced woman named Maria with streaks of gray in her dark hair, took one look at my arm and her expression hardened. What happened? She asked as she carefully examined the swelling. I fell down the stairs, I said automatically. It was the lie I had prepared, the story I had practiced. Maria's eyes met mine, and I saw she didn't believe me for a second. Are you sure? Because this looks like a defensive injury to me. The way the bone broke, the bruising pattern. Someone did this to you, didn't they? I felt my carefully constructed composure start to crack, my throat tightened, and fresh tears threatened to spill over, but I just shook my head. I fell. Please, can you just help me? She studied me for a long moment, and I saw the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to push, wanted to call someone, wanted to help in a way that went beyond just setting my bone. But in the end, she nodded slowly. Okay, she said quietly, but I'm going to give you some information before you leave, just in case you ever need it. She set my arm, put it in a cast, and gave me painkillers I couldn't afford but she didn't charge me for. Before I left, she pressed a card into my good hand with the number for a domestic violence hotline and a list of resources. I took it, though I knew I wouldn't call, not yet. But I did do something else. I took photos of my injury with my phone. I kept the medical report Maria gave me. I started documenting everything. Every cruel comment, every dismissive gesture, every time Scarlett mocked my cast or Patricia acted like I was an inconvenience for getting hurt. I recorded conversations on my phone, hiding it in my pocket with the recording app running. I started writing everything down in a journal I kept hidden under my mattress. If they wanted to pretend I didn't matter, fine. But I would make sure there was a record. I would make sure someone knew the truth, even if it was just future me. The weeks that followed were a strange kind of torture. Scarlett found my cast endlessly amusing. She called it my attention-seeking accessory and made a show of signing it with crude drawings and insulting messages. Patricia acted as if I had broken my own arm just to inconvenience her, sighing dramatically whenever I struggled with simple tasks, but I kept my head down and continued planning. At night, when they thought I was asleep, I researched. I found my father's name in old documents, tracked him through social media, Discovered he was living in a small town about 3 hours away. He had a new family now, a whole life I knew nothing about. Patricia had always said he wanted nothing to do with me. But looking at his Facebook page, seeing photos of him smiling with a little girl who must be his stepdaughter, I wondered if that was true. I wondered if Patricia had lied about more than I realized. It was during one of my late-night research sessions that I stumbled upon something interesting. Scarlett had been bragging for months about her new boyfriend, Maxwell Thorne, a young entrepreneur with family money and a growing tech company. She showed off his gifts, posted carefully curated photos of them together, talked endlessly about their future. According to her, she was working as a designer at a prestigious interior design firm, and they were the perfect power couple. But one sleepless night, my arm aching despite the painkillers, I decided to dig deeper. Something about Scarlett's stories had never quite added up. The hours she claimed to work never matched when she was actually home. The projects she described seemed copied from Pinterest boards. Her knowledge of design was surface level at best. So I called the firm. I pretended to be a potential client who had heard wonderful things about Scarlett's work and wanted to book a consultation. The receptionist was polite but confused. "I'm sorry," she said, "but we don't have anyone by that name working here." "Scarlett Harrison?" I repeated, my heart starting to pound. "She's told us so much about the amazing work she's doing with you." There was a pause. "Ma'am, not only does that person not work here, but we actually have a restriction on file. She was banned from the premises last year after an incident with one of our senior designers. She was posing as an intern and taking credit for other people's work. If you see her, please be aware she is not affiliated with our company in any way." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. Scarlett had been lying, not just exaggerating or embellishing, but completely fabricating an entire career. I dug deeper, looking at her social media more carefully. The photos of her office were all stock images or taken in hotel lobbies. The work projects she posted were stolen from other designers' portfolios. Her entire professional life was a carefully constructed fiction, and she was using that fiction to trap Maxwell Thorne. I should have felt guilty about what I did next. Maybe a better person would have. But as I sat there with my broken arm still aching, remembering the triumphant look on Scarlett's face as Patricia toasted her for putting me in my place, I felt nothing but cold determination. I created a new email account, one that couldn't be traced back to me. I spent hours compiling evidence, screenshots of the real designers whose work Scarlett had stolen. Photos of her at bars and clubs during hours she claimed to be at work. The statement from the design firm about her being banned. Photos of her social media accounts where she had created elaborate lies. I organized it all into a clear, concise document. Then I wrote a simple message to Maxwell Thorne. "Look into your girlfriend's career. The truth is more painful than the beautiful lie. She's not who she says she is." I attached all the evidence and hit send before I could second-guess myself. 2 days later, all hell broke loose. I was in my room, trying to study for my online certification courses, when I heard Scarlett's scream of rage from downstairs. It was followed by the sound of something shattering, probably her phone hitting the wall. I heard her thundering up the stairs, and I had just enough time to stand up before my door flew open and slammed against the wall. "You," Scarlett snarled, her face twisted with fury. "You did this. You destroyed everything. Maxwell broke up with me. He called me a liar and a fraud. What did you do?" I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, imagining what I would say, how I would stand up for myself. But now that it was here, I felt surprisingly calm. I reached down and unstrapped the brace from my arm. The cast had come off a week ago, but the doctor had given me a removable brace for support. Underneath, my arm was still discolored with fading bruises, the scar from where the bone had broken still visible. I held my arm up, letting her see the damage she had done. "I told him the truth," I said quietly. "Something you've clearly never done. I didn't lie about you, Scarlett. I just showed him who you really are. Unlike you and Patricia, I don't need lies to get by." She lunged at me, but this time I was ready. I stepped aside, and she stumbled past me into the hall. Patricia appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the commotion. "What is going on?" she demanded. "Ella ruined my relationship," Scarlett screamed. "She told Maxwell lies about me. She's trying to destroy my life." "I didn't lie," I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice was. "I told him the truth about your fake job and your stolen portfolio. You did this to yourself." Patricia's face went pale, then red. She pushed past Scarlett and got right in my face, her finger pointing at my chest. "How dare you interfere in your sister's life? How dare you sabotage her happiness? You will apologize right now, and you will fix this." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid. I felt nothing but contempt. "No," I said simply. "I won't." "You want to know what I'm done with, Patricia? I'm done being your punching bag. I'm done being blamed for your failed marriage. I'm done being less important than your precious Scarlett, who has never worked a day in her life while I've been supporting this household since I was 16. I'm done pretending any of this is normal or okay. If you walk out that door, Patricia said, her voice low and dangerous, you are never coming back. I will not have you in my life. Do you understand me? I looked at her one more time. At this woman who was supposed to be my mother but had chosen to be my tormentor instead. At Scarlett, who had broken my arm and faced no consequences. At this house that had never felt like home. Good, I said. That's exactly what I want. I walked to my closet and pulled out the single backpack I had already packed with my essential documents, some clothes, and my laptop. I had been preparing for this moment, knowing it would come eventually. Patricia and Scarlett stood frozen in shock as I walked past them and down the stairs. At the front door, I paused. I thought about saying something dramatic, some final cutting remark that would wound them the way they had wounded me, but in the end, I realized they didn't deserve my words. They had never listened anyway. I left the house and didn't look back, but before I had gone upstairs, I had left something for Patricia to find. A sealed envelope tucked under her pillow, containing copies of all the evidence I had gathered about Scarlett's lies, my medical reports, my photos, the recordings, and a note that simply said, "The truth will find you, one way or another." I drove my old, beat-up Toyota toward the address I had found for Robert. It was a 3-hour drive, and I had plenty of time to think, to second-guess, to wonder if I was making a terrible mistake. But every time doubt crept in, I looked down at my arm, at the scar that would always be there, and I remembered the sound of Patricia and Scarlett clinking their wine glasses over my pain. Robert lived in a small town called Maplewood, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and the main street still had an old-fashioned diner. I parked in front of that diner, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Through the window, I could see him, my father. Older than in the photos I remembered, with gray threading through his dark hair, but unmistakably him. He was sitting at a booth, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, working up the courage. Then I thought about Patricia's face when she told me Robert had never wanted me, that he had abandoned us, and never looked back. I thought about all the years I had believed her, all the years I had felt unwanted and unloved, and I decided I needed to know the truth. The bell above the door chimed as I walked in. Robert looked up automatically, the way people do when they hear that sound, and our eyes met. I watched the coffee cup slip from his hands, watched it fall in what seemed like slow motion and shatter on the table. Coffee spread across the newspaper, but he didn't seem to notice. He was staring at me like he had seen a ghost. "Ella?" he whispered, his voice breaking on my name. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely, and tears were burning behind my eyes. I just nodded. He was out of the booth and across the diner before I could blink, his arms wrapping around me in a hug that felt like coming home after years of being lost. I felt him shaking, felt his tears soaking into my hair, and finally, I let myself cry too. "My girl," he kept saying over and over. "My baby girl. I thought I'd never see you again." We sat in that booth for hours while he told me everything. How Patricia had filed for divorce and immediately moved to block all his attempts at contact. How he had sent letters every month that were returned unopened. How he had sent child support payments that Patricia had refused and sent back. How he had hired lawyers who told him that without evidence of abuse or neglect, he had no legal grounds to force visitation when Patricia had full custody and I was old enough to refuse to see him. But I never refused. I said, my voice raw. "She never told me you were trying to reach me. She said you left and never looked back. She said you didn't want me." Robert's face crumpled, and he pulled out his wallet with shaking hands. Inside was a photo of me at age 7, my school picture from the year before the divorce. It was worn and faded from being carried and looked at so many times. "I never stopped wanting you," he said. "Not for a single day. I have every birthday card I ever sent you, every letter, every return check. I kept all of it, hoping that someday you'd want to know the truth." He took me home to meet Carol, his wife, and I understood immediately why he had married her. She was the opposite of Patricia in every way warm, where Patricia was cold, genuine where Patricia was calculating, kind where Patricia was cruel. And Lily, Carol's daughter from her first marriage, was a bright-eyed 12-year-old who looked at me with open curiosity and immediate acceptance. "You have Dad's eyes," she said simply. "I always wanted a big sister." They gave me the guest room, told me I could stay as long as I needed, and didn't push me to talk about why I had come. But that night, when I was alone, I finally broke down completely. I cried for the years I had lost, for the lies I had believed, for the pain I had endured. I cried for the girl I had been, who had thought she deserved to be treated the way Patricia and Scarlett treated her. And I cried with relief that maybe, just maybe, I had finally found a place where I was wanted. The next morning, Carol offered me a job at her bookstore. It wasn't much, just helping with inventory and customer service, but it was honest work and she promised to be flexible with my hours so I could finish my online certification. Robert refused to take any money for rent, saying he owed me 18 years of support that Patricia had denied him the chance to give. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of a real family. We had dinner together every night. They asked about my day and actually listened to the answers. Lily helped me study for my certification exams, and I helped her with her homework. Carol taught me about books and about running a small business. Robert taught me to change my own oil and fix minor things around the house, all the skills he had wanted to teach me years ago. I thought Patricia and Scarlett would leave me alone. I was wrong. It started with text messages. Angry ones from Scarlett, calling me every name she could think of. Manipulative ones from Patricia, alternating between trying to make me feel guilty and trying to threaten me. I blocked their numbers. Then they found my email and started bombarding me there. I marked them as spam. Then Scarlett showed up at the bookstore. I was shelving books in the back when I heard the bell chime. Carol's voice called out a greeting, and then I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. "I'm looking for Ella Harrison," Scarlett said, sounding deceptively polite. I walked out before Carol could answer, not wanting her caught in the middle of this. Scarlett stood in the middle of the store, looking utterly out of place in her designer clothes and expensive sunglasses. She pulled the sunglasses off when she saw me, and her eyes were filled with venom. "So this is where you ran off to?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "A rinky-dink bookstore in a nowhere town. How perfect for you." "You need to leave," I said quietly. "I'll leave when I'm ready," she shot back. "You think you can just destroy my life and run away? You cost me Maxwell. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I told him the truth," I said. "If the truth destroyed your relationship, that's on you, not me." She moved toward me, and I saw her hand coming up, but I was done being her victim. I stepped back quickly, and her hand met only air. "Touch me again and I will call the police," I said, loud enough that several customers looked over. "I have evidence of what you did last time. Photos, medical records, recordings. Try me." Scarlett's face went white. She looked around at the people watching, at Carol standing behind the counter with her phone in her hand, clearly ready to dial 911, and she seemed to deflate. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yes, it is," I said. "It's been over. You just didn't realize it yet." After she left, I stood there, shaking. Carol came over and put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I admitted. "But I will be." That night, I sat down with Robert, Carol, and Daniel. Daniel was someone I had met at a community support group Carol had suggested I attend. He was a lawyer who volunteered his time helping abuse survivors, and somewhere along the way, we had become friends. More than friends, really, though we were taking things slowly. "I want to press charges," I told them. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of letting them get away with it, and I'm worried that if I don't do something, they'll just find someone else to hurt." Daniel nodded slowly. "It won't be easy," he warned, "but you have a strong case. The medical evidence, the recordings, the witness statements. If you're sure you want to do this, I'll help you." "I'm sure," I said, and I was. Filing the police report was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Sitting in that sterile office, telling a stranger about the worst moments of my life, reliving every cruel word and violent act. But I did it. I gave them everything: the photos of my broken arm, the medical reports from Maria, the recordings of Patricia and Scarlett's abuse, Robert's evidence of Patricia's lies and obstruction. The detective assigned to my case, a woman named Sarah Chen, listened to everything and then looked at me with something like respect. "You've been very thorough," she said. "Most victims don't have this level of documentation." "I'm not a victim anymore," I said. "I'm a survivor, and I want justice." The day Scarlett was arrested, I wasn't there. I was at the bookstore, helping Carol set up a new display. My phone rang, and it was Detective Chen. "We have her in custody," she said. "Given the evidence and her lack of remorse, we're recommending the DA pursue maximum charges. You should expect her to make bail, but she won't be allowed to contact you. If she tries, call me immediately." I thanked her and hung up, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe fully. The weight I had been carrying, the fear that they would come after me and hurt me again, finally lifted just a little. The trial took 6 months to get to court. 6 months of waiting, of Patricia's lawyers trying to get the charges dropped, of Scarlett's friends and family testifying what a good person she was. 6 months of Patricia calling me a liar and attention seeker in the press, trying to paint me as a vindictive ex-family member out for revenge. But in the end, the evidence spoke louder than their words. Maria testified about my injuries and her concerns about domestic violence. Robert testified about Patricia's pattern of manipulation and lies. The recordings played in the courtroom were damning. And when I took the stand and showed my arm, the scar still visible, I watched several jurors' faces change from skeptical to sympathetic. Daniel was brilliant, laying out a clear picture of years of abuse and neglect, of a young woman who had finally found the courage to stand up for herself. Patricia tried to defend Scarlett, tried to claim I had provoked the attack, but Daniel had recordings of her telling me not to call the police, of her celebrating my injury with wine and toasts. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the forewoman read the verdict clearly: guilty on all counts. Scarlett was sentenced to 18 months in prison, with mandatory anger management classes and community service to follow. Patricia wasn't charged criminally, but the publicity destroyed her. Her friends abandoned her social clubs dropped her, and the business partners who had once courted her favor suddenly had nothing to do with her. She was effectively exiled from the life she had built. Standing outside the courthouse after sentencing, with Robert on one side and Daniel on the other, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, there was still too much to process, too much healing left to do, but peace. The knowledge that I had fought back, that I had refused to be silent, that I had made them face consequences for their actions. How do you feel? Daniel asked quietly. Free, I said. I finally feel free. 6 months later, Daniel asked me to marry him. We were at the bookstore after hours, sitting in the reading nook that had become our favorite spot. He didn't make a big production out of it, didn't get down on one knee or give a long speech. He just looked at me with those warm brown eyes and said, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you've fought to build a better life. Will you marry me? I said yes without hesitation. Because Daniel knew all of me's broken parts and the healing parts and the parts that were still figuring out who I wanted to be. And he loved all of it. We planned a small wedding in Carol's garden. Just close friends and family: Robert, Carol, Lily, a few friends I had made in town, and Daniel's family. Nothing fancy, nothing ostentatious. Just people who genuinely cared about us, celebrating something real. The morning of the wedding, as Carol helped me into my dress, I looked at myself in the mirror. I had expected to see the girl I used to be, the shadow girl who existed on the edges of other people's lives. But that girl was gone. The woman looking back at me was strong, scarred but healing, ready to start a new chapter. You look beautiful, Carol said softly. I feel beautiful, I said, and I meant it. Before the ceremony, I did one last thing. I addressed an envelope to Patricia's house, to the address I hadn't thought about in months. Inside, I placed a photo from the wedding, Daniel and me, laughing at something Robert had said, pure joy on our faces. And another photo of me with Robert, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling like we'd never been apart. I didn't write a message. I didn't need to. The photos said everything that needed to be said. I had moved on. I had built a life filled with love and respect and genuine happiness, and they weren't part of it. I mailed it and didn't think about it again. The wedding was perfect. Robert walked me down the aisle, tears in his eyes. Daniel waited at the end with a smile that made my heart skip. Lily was my maid of honor, thrilled to be part of the celebration. We said our vows under a canopy of flowers, promising to love and support each other through whatever came next. At the reception, Robert gave a toast that made everyone cry. He talked about losing me for so many years and the miracle of getting me back. He talked about watching me rebuild my life with courage and grace. And he talked about how proud he was to call me his daughter. To Ella, he said, raising his glass, the strongest person I know, may your future be as bright as your spirit. Everyone drank, and I felt Daniel's hand squeeze mine under the table. I looked around at all these people who loved me, who saw me, who celebrated me for who I was, rather than trying to make me into something I wasn't. Later, Patricia told me through mutual acquaintances that she and Scarlett had received the photos. Patricia had apparently looked at them for a long time before putting them in a drawer. Scarlett, fresh out of prison and bitter, had torn hers up. I didn't care. I hadn't sent them for their reactions. I had sent them to close a chapter, to prove to myself that I had truly moved on. Because I had. I was no longer the girl who served soup with shaking hands, who apologized for taking up space, who believed she deserved abuse. I was Ella, wife to Daniel, daughter to Robert and Carol, sister to Lily. I was a bookstore manager working toward her dream of getting a degree in library science. I was someone who had looked at rock bottom and decided to climb. A year after the wedding, I graduated with my degree. Carol threw a party at the bookstore, inviting everyone in town who had become part of my extended family. Daniel gave me a leather-bound journal with my name embossed on the cover. Inside the first page, he had written, "For all the stories you'll write, and all the chapters yet to come." I had started writing, actually. Not just in journals anymore, but real writing. Essays about surviving abuse, about rebuilding after trauma, about finding the courage to walk away from toxic relationships. A local magazine published one of my pieces, and I started getting emails from other women who saw themselves in my story. Women who were still trapped, still making excuses, still hoping things would get better. I responded to every single one. I shared resources, offered encouragement, and told them what I wish someone had told me years earlier. You deserve better. You deserve safety and respect and love. And it's never too late to start over. One woman in particular stayed in touch. Her name was Jen, and her story was eerily similar to Minia's stepfamily situation, where she was treated as less than, where she was blamed for things outside her control, where small cruelties had escalated into something darker. We became friends over email, and eventually she found the courage to leave. She moved across the country, started therapy, and began rebuilding her life. A year later, she sent me a photo of herself at her college graduation, her smile radiant with pride and freedom. "You saved my life," she wrote. "Thank you for showing me it was possible." I cried when I read that, not from sadness but from a deep sense of purpose. All the pain I had endured, all the years of suffering, if it meant I could help even one person escape a similar situation, it was worth it. Not that I had deserved the abuse, but that I could transform it into something meaningful. Daniel and I bought a small house on the edge of town, a fixer-upper with good bones and a yard perfect for the garden I had always wanted. Robert helped us renovate it on weekends, teaching me how to install cabinets and repair drywall. Carol decorated it with books and plants and all the warmth that had been missing from Patricia's perfectly appointed but soulless house. Lily came over almost every day after school, treating our home like a second base. She would sprawl on the couch doing homework while I made dinner, or help me in the garden while talking about her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. She called me her sister without hesitation, and I called her mine with equal certainty. 2 years after the wedding, I got a call from Detective Chen. I hadn't heard from her since the trial, and my heart started racing when I saw her name on my phone. "Is everything okay?" I asked immediately. "More than okay," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I wanted you to know that we just closed a case involving Scarlett. She violated her probation, got into an altercation with a coworker at the community service site where she was assigned. The judge revoked her probation, and she's going back to prison to serve out the remainder of her original sentence, plus additional time for the probation violation." I sat down slowly, processing this information. I had stopped following Scarlett's situation after the trial, had intentionally removed myself from any knowledge of what she was doing. Part of healing had been letting go of the need to know whether she had changed or learned anything. "How do you feel about that?" Detective Chen asked. I thought about it carefully. "Sad," I said finally. "Not for her exactly, but for the situation. I wish she had used this as an opportunity to actually change, but I'm not surprised. And I'm relieved to know she can't hurt anyone else for a while." "You're a remarkable person, Ella," Detective Chen said. "Most people in your situation would be celebrating. The fact that you can feel compassion even for someone who hurt you says a lot about your character." After we hung up, I sat in my garden and thought about Scarlett, about the girl who had been given everything: money, privilege, a mother who adored her and had still chosen cruelty. About how she had broken my arm and celebrated it with wine, about how she had never once apologized or showed remorse, and I felt sorry for her, not in a patronizing way, but genuinely. Because Scarlett would probably spend her whole life angry and bitter, blaming others for her problems, never understanding that her own choices had led her to this place. She would never know the peace that comes from taking responsibility, from making amends, from choosing to be better. I had that peace. It hadn't come easily or quickly, but I had it, and no one could take it from me. 3 years after I left Patricia's house, I heard through the grapevine that she had moved away. She had lost her social standing, her reputation, most of her money and legal fees, and the settlement she had been forced to pay me. She had moved to a different state, far from anyone who knew her story, to start over. Part of me wondered if she ever thought about me, if she ever regretted her choices. If she ever lay awake at night remembering the way she had chosen Scarlett over me time and time again, the way she had celebrated my pain, the way she had let her daughter break my arm and then blamed me for it. But ultimately, it didn't matter. Patricia's journey wasn't my responsibility. I had spent too many years making her choices my problem, carrying guilt that wasn't mine to carry. I had grieved the mother I never had made peace with the fact that some people are simply incapable of the love and care a child needs, and I had moved forward. On the 4th anniversary of the day I walked out of Patricia's house, Daniel surprised me with a weekend trip. We drove to the coast, stayed in a small bed and breakfast overlooking the ocean, and spent our days walking on the beach and our nights talking about the future. "I've been thinking," Daniel said as we sat on the beach watching the sunset, "about family, about what we want to build together." I looked at him, at the man who had seen me at my lowest and loved me through it, who had stood beside me in court and held my hand through panic attacks and celebrated every milestone of my healing, who had never once made me feel like my past was too much or too damaged. "I want to build something beautiful," I said, "something based on trust and respect and genuine love, everything I didn't have growing up." "Me too," he said. He took my hand, threading his fingers through mine. "I want to adopt. Give a kid who needs a home the kind of family you found with Robert and Carol. What do you think?" I thought about Lily, about how Carol had welcomed her stepdaughter with open arms and made her feel cherished, about how Robert had never stopped trying to reach me, even when Patricia put up every barrier she could, about how family isn't just about blood, it's about choice and commitment and showing up every day with love. "I think that's perfect," I said. A year later, we brought home Emma. She was 8 years old, with dark curly hair and eyes that held too much wariness for someone so young. She had been in the foster system for 3 years after being removed from a neglectful home, and she flinched at sudden movements and hoarded food in her room and tested every boundary we set. I recognized her immediately. She was me, just younger, still in the thick of survival mode. And I was determined to show her what I had learned, that healing was possible, that she deserved love, that her past didn't define her future. It wasn't easy. There were nights when Emma screamed that she hated us, that she wanted to leave, that we couldn't make her stay. There were moments when she stole things or lied or pushed us away as hard as she could. But Daniel and I stayed steady. We set boundaries with love. We showed up consistently. We proved through our actions that we weren't going anywhere. Slowly, gradually, Emma started to trust. She stopped hoarding food when she realized there would always be more. She stopped flinching when she realized we would never hurt her. She started calling us mom and dad tentatively at first, then with more confidence. The day she came home from school and ran to me crying because a boy had been mean to her, seeking comfort instead of hiding in her room, I knew we had made real progress. I held her while she cried, smoothed her hair, and told her she was brave and strong and loved, all the things I had needed to hear at her age. Robert and Carol adored Emma instantly. Lily took her role as big sister seriously, teaching Emma about books and music and all the things that had helped her when Carol had first come into her life. We became a true multi-generational family, complicated and imperfect, but genuine. 5 years after I walked away from Patricia's house, I published a book. It was a memoir about surviving family abuse and finding the courage to build a better life. I had been working on it in secret for 2 years, pouring all my experiences and hard-won wisdom onto the page. I titled it The Shadow Girl's Reckoning. The book launch was at Carol's bookstore, naturally. The whole town turned out all the people who had welcomed me and supported me and become my chosen family. Robert gave a speech that made everyone cry again. Emma stood beside me proudly, telling anyone who would listen that her mom was an author. But the moment that meant the most came later, when a young woman approached me nervously. I read an advance copy. She said quietly, "I'm living in a situation like you described, with my stepmom and stepsister. And I thought it was normal, or that I deserved it, or that I was too sensitive. But your book made me realize I don't have to accept it. I can leave." I took her hands in mine. "You can," I said. "You deserve so much better, and if you need help, I'm here." I gave her my contact information, connected her with resources, offered her the support I wish I had received earlier. She left with tears in her eyes but also with hope in her face. That night, lying in bed next to Daniel with Emma asleep down the hall, I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The pain and the struggle, yes, but also the resilience and the growth. The way I had refused to let my past define my future. The way I had transformed my trauma into purpose. I thought about Patricia and Scarlett, about the night they had raised their wine glasses over my broken body, about how they had celebrated my suffering, believing they had won. But they hadn't won. They had lost everything that mattered: integrity, relationships, peace. While I had gained everything I had ever really needed: love, family, purpose, myself. I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't think about them often. They had become characters in a story I had survived and moved beyond. Cautionary tales about what happens when you choose cruelty over compassion. Sometimes I wondered if they ever thought about that dinner, about the moment everything changed, if Patricia ever regretted pouring that wine, if Scarlett ever wished she had made a different choice. But their thoughts and feelings were no longer my responsibility. I had spent too much of my life trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. Now I saved my energy for people who deserved it. My book became a modest success. Not a bestseller, but successful enough. I started getting speaking invitations, opportunities to share my story and help others. I spoke at domestic violence shelters and support groups, at colleges and community centers. Every time I told my story, I saw my own past reflected in someone's eyes, the recognition, the pain, the hope that maybe they could survive too. And I told them, yes, you can survive. Yes, you can heal. Yes, you deserve better. Yes, it's worth it to fight for yourself. Yes, the future can be different from the past. One evening, almost 6 years after I had left Patricia's house, I was tucking Emma into bed when she looked up at me with those dark eyes that were finally starting to lose their wariness. "Mom," she said, "do you think your mom ever thinks about you?" It was a question I had asked myself many times. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly. "Maybe she does, but it doesn't matter anymore. I have the family I need right here." "Do you think my first mom thinks about me?" Emma asked, her voice small. I pulled her close. "I think she probably does," I said gently. "But loving someone doesn't always mean you're able to take care of them the way they need. Sometimes the most loving thing is to let someone else step in and give that child what they deserve." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you picked me," she finally said. "I'm glad you picked us back." I said, kissing her forehead. Being a family is a choice we make every day, and I choose you, always. After she fell asleep, I went downstairs where Daniel was reading on the couch. I curled up next to him, and he wrapped his arm around me automatically. You okay? He asked. Better than okay, I said. I was just thinking about how far I've come, how different my life is now compared to what it was. You built this, Daniel said. You chose to walk away from toxicity. You chose to heal. You chose to create something better. That takes incredible courage. I thought about the girl I had been, the one who had believed she deserved cruelty, who had swallowed her anger and her pain and tried to be invisible. I thought about the moment I had decided enough was enough, the moment I had walked out the door and never looked back. They thought they won, I said quietly. That night when they raised their glasses and celebrated breaking my arm, they thought they had beaten me. But they didn't, Daniel said. No, I agreed. They didn't, because I'm here, and I'm happy, and I've built a life I'm proud of. And they're still the same people they always were, bitter, cruel, empty. I won by refusing to become like them. That was the truth I had learned through all of this. Revenge wasn't about making them suffer. It wasn't about punishing them or getting even. Real revenge was building a life so full of love and meaning that their cruelty became irrelevant. It was proving that they couldn't break me, that I was stronger than they had ever imagined, that I deserved every good thing that had come my way. They had tried to make me small, but I had grown larger than their cruelty. They had tried to make me worthless, but I had built a life of value and purpose. They had tried to convince me I would never be anything. But I had become someone I was genuinely proud to be. That was my revenge. Not their pain, but my peace. Not their loss, but my gain. Not their regret, but my growth. And it was sweeter than any wine they could have poured. 7 years after I walked away, I received an unexpected letter. The return address was from a state halfway across the country, and I didn't recognize the handwriting. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. It was from Patricia. My hands shook as I unfolded the single page. The handwriting was shaky, less confident than I remembered. Ella, it began, I don't expect you to read this, or to respond if you do. I don't even know if this address is still current. But I needed to try. I've spent the last several years in therapy, working through my own trauma, and trying to understand why I treated you the way I did. There are reasons: my own abusive childhood, my fear of being alone, my resentment of your father, but there are no excuses. None. You deserved a mother who protected you, who celebrated you, who made you feel safe and loved. Instead, I chose Scarlett over you time and time again. I enabled her abuse. I participated in it. And when you needed me most, I betrayed you in the worst possible way. I saw your book. I read it. Every word felt like a knife, not because you were cruel or exaggerated, but because it was all true. That's who I was. That's what I did. And I will carry the shame of that for the rest of my life. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking to be part of your life. I gave up that right long ago. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then, that you were always the strong one, the good one, the one who deserved better. I hope you're happy. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Patricia. I read the letter 3 times, my emotions swinging wildly between anger and sadness, and something I couldn't quite name. Daniel found me sitting at the kitchen table, the letter in my hands, tears streaming down my face. What is it? He asked, concerned. I handed him the letter and watched him read it. When he finished, he looked at me carefully. How do you feel? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to throw this away and never think about it again. Part of me wants to write back and tell her exactly how much damage she did. And part of me just feels sad. Sad that it took her this long. Sad that she missed out on knowing the person I became. Sad that Scarlett probably never got therapy and probably hasn't changed at all. You don't have to respond, Daniel said. You don't owe her anything. I know, I said, but I think I want to. Not for her, but for me. For closure. I spent a week thinking about what I wanted to say. In the end, I kept it simple. Patricia, I received your letter. I appreciate you taking responsibility for your actions. That's more than many people in your position would do. I want you to know that I'm not carrying anger toward you anymore. I grieved the mother I needed and didn't have, and I've made peace with that. I have a family now who loves me unconditionally, and I'm building a life I'm proud of. I hope you continue with your therapy and your healing journey. I hope you find peace with yourself, but I need you to understand that there is no place for you in my life. Too much damage was done, and some things can't be undone. I wish you well, but from a distance. Take care of yourself. Ella. I mailed it and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had said what needed to be said, set the boundary that needed to be set, and closed that chapter definitively. Patricia's journey toward redemption, if that's what it was, wasn't my responsibility. I had my own journey to continue. Emma graduated from high school with honors. I sat in the audience with Daniel, Robert, Carol, and Lily, and cried proud tears as she walked across the stage. She gave a speech about resilience and second chances that had the entire auditorium in tears. Afterward, she found me in the crowd and threw her arms around me. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for showing me what family really means." "You did this yourself," I said. "I just gave you the support you deserved." "You're amazing, Emma. I'm so proud to be your mom." That night, we celebrated at our favorite restaurant. 3 generations of chosen family around a table filled with laughter and love. Looking around at all these faces, Robert, who had never stopped fighting for me, Carol, who had welcomed me with open arms, Lily, who had accepted me as her sister, Daniel, who loved me through all my healing, Emma, who had taught me the true meaning of resilience, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was what I had been searching for my whole life. Not perfection, but authenticity. Not people who pretended I was something I wasn't, but people who loved me for exactly who I was. Not a family held together by obligation or manipulation, but one built on mutual respect and genuine care. Later that night, Daniel and I sat on our back porch, watching fireflies dance in the garden. The house was quiet, Emma having gone to a graduation party with friends. It was one of those perfect summer evenings that feels suspended in time, full of contentment and possibility. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked. "About how that dinner 7 years ago changed everything," I said. "About how it was the worst night of my life, and also the catalyst for the best thing that ever happened to me. Because if Scarlett hadn't broken my arm, if Patricia hadn't chosen her over me so completely that I finally couldn't deny the truth anymore, I might still be there. Still trying to earn love from people who would never give it. Everything you've built," Daniel said quietly, "you did in spite of them, not because of them. You could have let that experience destroy you. Instead, you let it transform you." "I think about Scarlett sometimes," I admitted. "I wonder if she ever changed, if prison taught her anything, if she ever thinks about that night and regrets it." "Does it matter?" Daniel asked gently. I thought about it. "No," I said finally, "it doesn't. Whether she changed or not, whether she regrets it or not, doesn't affect my life anymore. I'm not waiting for her apology or her recognition. I don't need her to acknowledge what she did for me, to know it was wrong. I've moved on." "That's growth," Daniel said, kissing my temple. "That's real freedom." He was right. For years after I left, I had imagined confrontations where Scarlett would apologize, where Patricia would admit she had been wrong, where they would see what they had lost and be devastated by it. But I didn't need that anymore. Their acknowledgement or lack thereof didn't change my worth. Their regret or lack thereof didn't impact my peace. I had spent so long defining myself in relation to them, the unwanted stepdaughter, the scapegoat, the victim of their cruelty. But I wasn't any of those things anymore. I was Ella Hartley, wife and mother, author and advocate, survivor and thriver. My identity was rooted in who I had chosen to become, not in what they had tried to make me. That was the ultimate revenge, I realized. Not that they suffered, but that they became irrelevant. Not that I hurt them back, but that I healed so completely that they no longer had the power to hurt me. Not that I made them pay, but that I built a life so full that there was no room in it for bitterness or hatred. They once raised their glasses and toasted my suffering, believing they had won, but I was the one who had won. I was the one who had taken my broken arm and my broken spirit and built something beautiful from the pieces. I was the one who had refused to let trauma define me. I was the one who got to sleep peacefully at night, surrounded by people who genuinely loved me, and that, in the end, was the sweetest victory of all. I looked at Daniel, at this man who had seen all my scars and loved me anyway. I thought about Emma sleeping safely upstairs, about Robert and Carol just a few miles away, about Lily starting her own journey as a veterinarian, about all the people I had helped through my book and my advocacy work. I thought about the life I had built from nothing, the family I had chosen and who had chosen me back. This was my revenge, this life, this love, this peace, and it was more than enough.